Good afternoon. We hope you've all enjoyed your lunch. And don't forget, you can join us on hashtag HTID4 to follow and join in the conversations. And our panel this afternoon, to begin, is here just to do that, to continue the conversation that is finally happening around women's health. And to moderate it and to take things to a new level, we welcome the founder CEO of BioUp, Elsy Boglioli. Elsy?
So, welcome everyone. I'm very happy to be here. Women's health is, I want to say of course, but it's not so obvious, and we'll get back to that. But at least for me, it's of course a critical topic. So I work with a number of health tech companies, young and emerging companies usually, across the spectrum of healthcare. And recently I've been approached by more and more women's health companies, which I think is a good sign that some innovation is emerging in the field. I've started to work with Gonzague, and we'll talk about his company a few months ago. And that has given me some kind of perspective on what's happening in the sector. So I don't want to say too much because I may be biased by some investor views and some comments I've been hearing recently. But so I would really like to leave the field to my co-panelists. But first of all, we have with us Marieta, Senior Vice President Europe at Merck. And Marieta, I think you have a very specific initiative at Merck also called Closing Gap. Maybe you can share a little bit about what you're doing at Merck and specifically with this initiative in this field.
Yeah, so first of all, thank you so much for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be here, also with my colleagues. So let's hope that we have really an interactive discussion. So let me start just telling what we do at Merck, So we are a science and technology company, that has been developing new treatments and medicines, especially also in the healthcare of women, So we have fertility, a big number of fertility treatments. We like to say that thanks to them, 5 million babies are in the world today. We are also, specialized in areas like multiple sclerosis, that as you know, so this is a disease that really the higher prevalence is in women. We also, have been working a lot, just in topics related with gender gap, and for that we created a big program that is called Closing Gap. Closing Gap is a cluster of 12 companies that we created 4 years ago. The key objective is just to answer a simple question: what is the cost for society for have not been able to take advantage of all the female talents that we have around the world? And how this is impacting the economy, because just let me say that there is no growth or no transformation in society if we are not really able, to manage all the female talent. And then we have been doing so many reports in health, of course. There are gaps in health when we talk about gender gap. There are also gaps in another, like employment, conciliation, etc., etc. Maybe later we can discuss how all these gaps in gender are really impacting and affecting the role, that women, but even the health of the women, when we think that we are mainly, using the most of our time out of work, taking care not only of children, but also relatives, etc. So then, with that intention, we created Closing Gap, and we just created an index that when you analyze, the gap that we currently have is almost 40%. And just if we continue the trend that we have today, it will take us more than 40 years to reach parity. So then, I think that with that is just one brief introduction, and later we can have more discussion.
Thank you very much. Marcel, you are VP of External Innovation and Research at Organon. Organon is a pretty unique company from a female health perspective. I think you'll tell us all about it. It was created as a spin-off from Merck. It would be interesting also to understand, what a spin-off means, and does it mean a heightened interest or a lack of interest in the field?
Thank you very much. And,
Sorry for being provocative.
No, it's a great question. And let me first thank the organizers for having me here. It's a great pleasure to participate in this discussion. Can I click on this one? Is something happening then?
I think you can. You might need to skip over the first few slides.
More slides are up. Yes, you are correct. So Organon is, sometimes people say Organon is an old company, but actually the Organon 2.0, as we sometimes say, is a new company. We were founded, spun out of Merck now 16, 17 months ago, last year, June. And the reason why that happened was because Merck, to be honest, wanted to get rid of generic products. And a company was founded based on that concept. And when the to-be CEO of that company thought about, okay, what is a company going to look like? It was decided that this new company was going to be, or is going to have a footprint focusing very much on women's health. And so a vision and a mission were formulated, which are visible on the slide here, but to really try to be innovative and generate innovations that would address, as we sometimes call it, her health. And so there's many reasons to be very passionate about that, as I will show you in a second. So when that was decided, basically it meant that all these generic products that came from Merck would generate the revenues in order to drive innovation moving forward. As people may know, Merck has a very big research organization. When Organon spun, we did not have, let's say, the equivalent of MRL, Merck Research Labs. We had no research labs. That was the concept of the new company, to basically drive innovation by tapping into external innovation and the emerging science, and hence the title of my role and my responsibility with my team and the business development people that we have in the organization to really try to tap into innovation in the external community. And so then the question is, okay, what do we mean with women's health? What are we focusing on? What are we interested in? And this slide basically summarized that for us. We try to identify the sort of 4 cornerstones. The more classical one are contraception and fertility, that probably everybody is aware of. But what we want to do as well is also focus on the male component of contraception, or the male component of fertility. Sometimes, everybody knows IVF and say, well, that's the solution if there's a problem to conceive. But the solution always lies in treatment of the female and not necessarily in treatment of the male. In some cultures and societies, when couples go to the doctor, it's never the problem of the guy, it's the problem of the woman. So an ICSI, which is a method to address that, still requires the woman to be treated with hormones. So male and female are very important for us in those 2 areas. The third cornerstone is really conditions that are unique to women. And endometriosis, a significant unmet need, polycystic ovary syndrome, fibroids, menopausal complaints are really, of course, unique to women, and innovation is possible in that area. What is really unique, I would say, to Organon is that we also have decided to work on maternal and peripartum conditions. There's not a lot of companies that want to work in that space. And of course, it's very difficult. It's difficult to work and to say to a pregnant woman, are you willing to be part of this clinical trial, for example? So I'm actually very proud to be able to work in a company that addresses that big unmet need problems during gestation, such as preterm labor and preeclampsia. And then at the bottom of the slide, there's a whole host of diseases that are understood or not understood, more prevalent in women than in men. Migraine, osteoporosis, autoimmune diseases, you name it. So there's a lot of reasons, I think, for companies to be interested in women's health indications. But let me stop here because we can further discussions on that later on.
Thanks a lot, and we'll indeed get back to all of these topics in a minute. I would like to turn to Gonzague. I don't know if he's still somewhere on video. We don't see him, but maybe someone, here we go. So Gonzague is the founder and CEO of a company called Womed, which actually has the potential to address most of your platforms, Marcel, so you guys should definitely talk. But Gonzague today is here to tell us about also the entrepreneurial perspective, and an interesting one coming from a non-female health first entrepreneurial experience, and also as a male heading a female health, women's health company. Gonzague, over to you.
Thanks, Elsy. Can you hear me okay? Yes. So thanks a lot for this kind of introduction. So indeed, I am a health tech entrepreneur. I had actually formerly previously started a company in the cardiovascular space, and now I co-founded and I'm the CEO of Womed, which is on a mission to offer solutions for women to live full and pain-free life and address some of their fertility issues. And we're specifically developing intrauterine therapies, which are based on a novel drug delivery technology that we think will be able to address multiple pathologies around the uterus, like endometriosis, infertility, cancer, and so on. And so, indeed, I am relatively new into this field after, having been in a slightly different therapeutic context. And what's kind of struck me when I started working in this field is how actually the needs, the medical needs, were mostly expressed by patients themselves. In cardiology, you tend to speak to cardiologists. They know exactly what they want to do. There's this idea that they are kind of having good control somehow of the understanding of the disease and how they think it should be treated or brought forward, and they have a vision for how things are moving into their specialty. Women's health, I found it very different in the sense that indeed there are needs, huge needs, and patients express them, women express them, often because they have the feeling they haven't been heard. And you have a more, let's say, a bit more passive, I would say, physician specialists who actually are used to listening to their patients, but not necessarily providing actively some solutions, and with obviously less innovations. So that has really struck me, where you can see that innovations will need to come from patients. And I think this is what we observe today. We're part of a larger movement, right? Femtech and Organon, I would hope to believe it's the case as well, is actually the expression of a focus on these issues, and we hope that it's going to actually drive a lot of innovations for women who obviously deserve this approach. So this is kind of a high-level introduction, at least, of where I believe this is very specific to this field, and where again. The needs are absolutely great as soon as you fact that no, it's not okay to be in pain when you have your periods, for instance, which is obviously what has been told to any little girl since pretty much the ages, right?
Thank you very much. We'll get back to that topic of patients being heard. Jenny, you're managing partner at Adjuvant Capital, which I believe focuses on impact investment and is largely funded by the Gates Foundation, or notably funded. Maybe you can tell us a bit more about what you do at Adjuvant, and also how you look at the topic of women's health and innovation in women's health.
Yeah, absolutely. Hello, everybody. My name is Jenny Yip, and I'm one of the managing partners at a life sciences investment fund called Adjuvant Capital. We focus exclusively on tackling global health challenges, which for us encompasses both kind of infectious disease and addressing those challenges, but also very, very importantly for us, and which is also very near and dear to my heart, sexual and reproductive health. And while most of our portfolio companies are based in Europe, because that's a lot where the clinical clinical innovation is coming from, that what's really unique about Adjuvant is we want to ensure that the target patients and the target beneficiaries of these products include those living in lower and middle income countries. So that's where the impact investment parts come in. But I think every day and all day about improving healthcare access and healthcare equity for those who are underserved. And yes, I spent a bunch of time at the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation before starting Adjuvant. And I think this is one of the things that has really heartened me in the last couple of years since we started Adjuvant. I think before, women's health was always maternal health or maternal and child health. And it was always about women as a mother, as if all the other times in our lives, like our health didn't matter. So I remember pitching 3 years ago to some of our investors, and I wanted to specifically change the notion of maternal health to sexual and reproductive health to cover a lot of the other indications. So I'm really heartened to see that there's so much more innovation coming out right now, so many other investors and pharma partners, and hopefully this is going to be a bright future.
Thank you very much. Bianca, you founded and lead Coulter Partners, an executive search and recruitment firm. And I know you have been involved in the field of women's health for a very long time. You've helped a number of companies for a number of years. So it's interesting also to hear about your view on the field today and your view about how it has evolved basically in the past years.
I think my perspective comes from, and I will be at sometimes, I think, a bit controversial because of it, comes from real conversations with leaders over, actually in my case, 30 years of working to build biotech, medtech, life sciences companies, and now we're broader than that because we also work in food tech, ag tech, clean tech, etc. But we are 130 people around the world. Half of our work is US, half is UK, Europe, and a little bit in Asia Pacific, where we have presences now. But the point of it all is we're talking to leaders, board members, C-suite, rising stars, and very heavily investors. We work with well over 50 funds, VC and private equity around the world. So I think our perspective is drawn, when it comes to women's health, from real, honest, behind-the-door conversations with people about what they're drawn to, what they're attracted to as leaders. And I think this is one of the topics we can come back to later. I think what we've seen, and we've worked, as you say, Elsy, with a number of really interesting women's health companies, is that they are often carve-outs of other businesses, or they're startups, but not particularly getting funding for truly innovative science. And, one of the challenges is that hormones are really complicated. Endometriosis is not easy. These things need a lot of investment and a lot of creative experimentation. If you look at the sources of innovation, including academia, do you really see a lot of women pioneering in academia? Of course they're trying to, but historically it's been I don't want to get totally onto the gender thing, but it's been quite a male world. So I think what we've seen is people, when they have got ideas in the women's health space, struggling to find backing. On the plus side, the positive side, because I don't want to be a misery guts, really, in the last few years, we've seen huge amounts of enthusiastic endeavor and increasingly interest from investors. Obviously, there are specialist funds, but also at this conference, I've made it a particular mission in advance of this panel to talk to all the investors I've been meeting, who we work with a lot on all sorts of biotech, about whether they're interested. Now, some of them pay a bit of lip service to it, if I'm honest, but I think all of them fundamentally say, if someone brings me a business plan that looks as though it has an ability to tackle a high unmet need, that has realistic looking science, great leadership, a proper business plan, we will fund it, whether it's women's health or not. And I think we need to smash this concept that it's some narrow little niche. It's a huge, rich field of opportunity. So I'll stop there and talk later, maybe.
Well, I'd like to elaborate on that, and I would like to hear your perspective. So actually, what I do hear, and I've been pitching some funds for some female health businesses recently, I have had investors, including female investors, tell me, oh, stop right there. We're never going to look at anything in female health. And I think, I, of course, haven't pitched 150 people, so I don't know how statistically significant it is. But I'd be quite interesting to hear your views around this table, Gonzague, and also everyone here. Do you feel you're still hearing this a lot? And if not, what is changing and what do you see changing that maybe I'm not yet seeing?
Yeah, maybe I'll start. So first of all, I am very open to hearing any pitch about women's health companies, so please come by and say hello. And then my colleague Lily D'Souza-Burr is also sitting in the first row. So first of all, I do think I am seeing a lot more women's health companies. And yes, I'm also seeing more female-led funds or just funds that are investing in women's health. I think the issue and the nuance here is some of the more dedicated women's health investors are still relatively small. So the check sizes they're writing are, 500,000, maybe 1 or 2 million. And Adjuvant is really one of the women's health funds that are a little bit more of scale. And even for us, women's health is one of the verticals that we look at because we're trying to tackle all global health challenges. But honestly, in the last couple of years, I'm seeing an upwards trend. So it's quite exciting.
Good to hear. Gonzague, maybe the CEO perspective.
Well, see, we're just starting actually to fundraise, so we're knocking at a few doors. And to be honest, I feel that actually this kind of wave of femtech companies being being more present and more active somehow has kind of eroded the idea that it was just a niche thing. So at least that's one thing. I think Jenny just said it really well. So women's health dedicated funds are relatively small, but I don't see yet any particular reluctance for the field as is, and quite on the contrary, just picking up on this wave.
Thanks. Marcel, maybe a word about the role a company like yours can play in driving innovation in women's health and helping also the younger companies?
Yeah, and first of all, yes, there are. Let's face the facts. There's not a lot of big companies that are interested in this space anymore, right? So, and Organon, our company is trying to introduce itself in the field again. And we can show that by the deals that we've done over the last year or so, right? We've done 7 deals, and most of them are in the women's health space, and so we are actively trying to recognize that innovation, and when the deals are good enough for us, we are willing to invest in those, and so, but I'm acutely aware that others. Jenny et al., if I may call it that way, right, definitely need to have some confidence that if you bring it to the next level, then there is somebody out there that wants to, take the risk and further invest in this moving forward. I think there's a very fundamental component, however, also in this discussion is where does the innovation come from? Where does the science come from? Right? Because at the end of the day, let's not forget that. It starts with the unmet need and it starts with a good scientific story, a proposal, as Bianca pointed out, right? But it has to be a scientific, solid proposal. And maybe the elephant in the room, you could say in a certain way, could be, okay, well, how much investment is there in women's health compared to other important areas, right? And then the answer to the question is, well, it's relatively low. So I would say that, but the good news you could say is I think also over the last few years there's a trend that I see in more interest in women's health. But since we made quite some noise over the last year, a lot of companies come to us. It's I just have to sit behind my desk and I don't have to go out there. They come to us because small companies are very happy that Organon is interested in this space. But yeah, we cannot fund all of them. Right, so there really needs to sort of be an ecosystem that will enable these early discoveries to to grow and to further develop, et cetera, et cetera. So, and how to get out of that sort of impasse, if you like, or problem of a lack of funding in the intermediate phase is I would say, the interesting question. But there's also sort of a chicken and an egg element in that discussion. But, we're trying to play our role so far, but more innovation is definitely needed.
And I don't want to be too depressing, but there are a couple of stats that might be useful here. And I read loads of stuff in the last few months about this, but I can't remember exactly who said this, which is terrible because I should attribute these to people. But I know that some very prominent studies have suggested that only 1% to 2% of R&D innovation expenditure is on women's health topics, and that only 2% to 3% of current pipelines address women's health. And if you think that that's typically pharma is both the buyer of innovation later down the line, but also often the birthing place of it when people maybe do something that's not core to their organization. Maybe they're in partnership with academia and then they break away. And, we could look at many, many years ago, GD Searle spawning tons of biotechs and various companies spawning lots of biotechs, when waves of execs left. There isn't going to be that impetus if there isn't any expenditure on it.
No, I agree.
Let's hear the pharma perspective, actually,
Yeah.
because we say there are not a lot of big companies interested, but I think we have one right here. So it's interesting to hear your view, Marieta.
Yeah, maybe just from, because I'm working Merck, and we are in Merck, the German Merck, not just the American. So then, and we are market leaders in fertility for so many years. So from our perspective, so we are still investing in women's health, but from the perspective more of the technology. What I mean is that maybe, the space for medicines to improve the current results that we already have maybe is not so easy. Instead, to work around technologies, how we really can even, working devices, embryo technology, etc., also, is a way to bring innovation and to improve results, that is what at the end all of us want. So we decided, just a couple of years ago that we wanted, to bring more innovation, but coming more from the area of technology and not just only in the medicine area.
Can I ask you to go a step further on that? So what do you think are the next big waves of innovation in women's health that will kind of make the big splash that we're all waiting for and show the breadth and depth of this market? Is there a particular area, a particular group of technologies that you think can help unlock the potential of this market in the coming years?
Yes, I think there's a few, well, maybe even more, but I don't want to talk too long. Let's say traditional, I would say women's health is maybe also associated with steroid hormones. This is sort of a hormonal field, if you like.
Because women are hormonal, just women, right? So.
Yeah, no, but and there's also, I think, something that needs to be recognized is I don't want hormones in my body. Synthetic hormones, right? And so in terms of a trend, I think, as our scientific understanding is growing, I think it's important to recognize the fact that non-hormonal solutions, which you do see in certain areas, are going to be more and more important. Whether this is in terms of menopause conditions or complaints, whether this is in terms of fertility control, whether this is in terms of male contraception, all of these areas, I think, are potentially addressable in a non-hormonal matter, and I think that's where innovation is happening. But I would be the first to say more is needed. Another element that I think is interesting is we had a session earlier on the microbiome. There's there's so many innovations happening in that space, but still it's relatively early innovation. But more and more we understand that, for example, the vaginal microbiome is a sort of a mirror of the health of a woman. right? So diagnostic applications that are possible in that regard, maybe combined with therapeutic solutions, are I think, at the horizon. And another example, and then I'll stop, is, let's say, biomarker research, right? With the growing amount of technologies that we have today, it becomes possible to identify better what determines a woman that either has endometriosis, for which it takes sometimes 7 to 10 years before she's diagnosed, to really say in a non-invasive manner, that's an endometriosis patient. So biomarkers in that space are critically important, but also during pregnancy. Wouldn't it be nice if in the first trimester of a pregnancy, woman goes to the doctor, I'm pregnant, we could do a simple test and say, well, hey, you are at risk for preterm labor, or you are at risk for this or for that. And so, but I would say with the new technology of today, that is within not, I wouldn't say within grasp, but it is a possibility that we are keen on looking to, and also listening to parties out there that are working in that space.
Yeah, I'll just add a minor point to that. And Bianca, you and I were talking about this just before the panel started. But it's the elevation of women's health diseases from just simply lifestyle diseases to something that's of more prominence. No one will be able to argue with me to say that endometriosis is a lifestyle disease. And only maternal health conditions that can cause you to die is worthy for R&D investment. So it's just another point to add to Marcel's.
I think another big topic, though, is the role of... Oh, sorry, Gonzague, do you want to go first?
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. It's a little harder to add a point when you're...
Go ahead, Gonzague.
Thank you. Just wanted to build up on indeed what was being said, and when you look at some of the trends that indeed we can observe and that are part of this kind of femtech movement is, first of all, the fact that women tend to want to have better control over their own health, over their own decisions, and that is obviously driving that movement. And beyond this, some of the things that have been accepted in the past, not anymore. Pain as a let's say as a normal condition, lifestyle condition, like you just said, Jenny, is obviously not acceptable. So we see this coming. We talked about hormones. We hear this also from patients, young and a bit more mature, from contraception to menopause. They just don't want to be, submitted to those hormonal treatments anymore. So we do see a lot of things that are indeed then now creating opportunities for innovations, and I think these are some of the things we also build on as we invent our new therapies. But I think these all are things that make this field from maybe a little bit of a rusty kind of not so sexy field to something extremely exciting for the future, I believe.
I was going to say the other side of all of this is the societal and the kind of demand end of the spectrum. And one of the things that we're seeing so much of now is focus in corporates, in companies, on how to make women's careers more, make women's work careers easier in a way. So things like menopause. In the workplace now, companies are increasingly focusing on having policies around these things. And the whole taboo nature of some of the women's health topics is being smashed. It's become much easier to talk about these things. And so women leaders are emerging more and more. And obviously they are powerful buyers, they're powerful influencers. So I think this is going to have an impact. And although the stats still say that maybe 17% of investors partners are women. Actually,
I think it's less.
I think maybe it's less, but I think we see some really strong forefront investors who are women who are actually very interested in taking up the flag. So I've got a lot of optimism about this as well, and the dedicated funds as well. So, it's not a particularly negative story now.
We actually hope it's turning into a very positive story, hence this roundtable. Marieta, maybe to the topic Bianca just mentioned, I'm curious to hear how you feel things have changed at Merck. You have been a company for a long time with a significant focus on female health. You have female leaders, you have a female CEO. Do you feel that there are things that you're looking at differently compared to other pharma companies? Do you see also a lot of young female health companies coming to maybe Merck Ventures for funding? How is it maybe different at Merck versus other large pharma companies?
Yeah, so I have here. So I also want to see things positively, you know, so because I believe that maybe behind all of this there are a lot of stigma, you know, that we have not been able to raise and to talk a lot, you know. So for us, you know, as she was telling, so we have, you know, a CEO that is a woman, so I'm heading Europe, also a woman. We have more than 45% of women leading position across Europe, general managers. We have, you know, just 80% of our site directors when we build the medicines are women. So I believe that when you are changing all of this in society and then you achieve that really the representation of women are in the 50%, you know, of all the roles across society, this will also impact positively in these kind of topics, you know, because at the end, if we have more women taking decisions, then of course, you know, women's health will be also part of the discussion. Let me say just one small thing, you know, we did a study in Spain, you know, some years ago, 4 years ago, to analyze what was, you know, the health in general of the women and the health of the men, and then analyzing the difference and in which areas, if there were or not a gap between men and women. And reality, you know, so there is a gap, you know. Women's usually live more years, but the conditions, the quality of the health is much, much worse. And mainly there is one part that is particularly interesting or concerning for women, that is all related with mental health in the sense of how many hours women are using for taking care of others and how this is impacting, you know, just in the health of the women. So sometimes when we talk about women's health, we are only thinking in maternity or we are only thinking in just hormones or whatever, but there are much more things, you know, and really, you know, when we analyze, you know, but how this was impacting negatively the economy, then there are big numbers behind how if we were more focused on improving the health of the women, then even the economy will really will grow more. So I believe that when we are talking with investors, if we are able, you know, to put on the table data that really confirms that the economy will grow more if the women have a better role, not only in health, but also across all the positions, then maybe things can start to change.
Yeah, and that's a trend in just global development, generally speaking, as well. Because if you look at some of the, just to switch gears completely away from healthcare into, say, financial services or financial inclusion, it has been proven that if you invest in a woman, then she goes invest in her family, her village, and others. I wanted to also pick up another point on just female decision makers, because I think it's important, not just because you know, just from an equality standpoint that you need women decision makers, but sometimes when a pitch is coming to me, I have to make a very, very quick decision in 45 minutes or so to say yes or no on further engagement and further diligence. And for me, if something resonates with me and I don't need, say, 20 minutes of that 45 minutes just to understand the market, I think that's when you get that further engagement from investors. So not only do you need just more female investors because you just do, I think there could be a very virtuous cycle here as well.
And I think we all know there have been multiple studies conducted across the world on the level of funding and the level of returns of female-led company. My old company, BCG, conducted one, and what we clearly saw is that female-founded companies, so female CEOs, female-led companies, have more difficulty in raising funds, but they generate better returns, which you can see it both ways. Is it because females are better leaders, or is it because the bar is so much higher, then there's only a small percentage of the companies that get funded? But either way, the returns are there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, one of our core motivations at the moment is to understand as much as possible people's capabilities and potential, as well as the track record they have, the boxes they've ticked in their prior experience, because some of the best CEOs are first-time CEOs, step-up CEOs, and when investors say to us, a syndicate of investors says, we're trying to hire a new CEO for this company, we would like a female CEO if possible, we necessarily have to say, well, you must be open-minded to people who haven't been a CEO before. And that's where the conversation sometimes gets a bit difficult. So we're championing this because there is plenty of evidence that first-time CEOs are often fantastic if you support them in the right way. But of course, if you hire them and then don't talk to them or give them a mentor or give them some funding for coaching, you're shooting yourself in the foot. But I think this is another aspect that needs to be looked at.
Yeah, absolutely. First-time fund managers, too, as a woman. So I'll just put that plug in.
Maybe, I think we have roughly 10 minutes left. Maybe we can see if there are any questions, either in the audience or in the chat.
We do have a question for Marieta that's come in. Could you please share more information about the Closing Gap initiative?
Yeah. Okay, so
thanks.
Yeah, just a very quick. What we are doing is just So we are studying, just all the different gaps that still persist in our society from different perspectives. So we have done we have published already 13 reports in health, in work-life balance, disability, pensions, mobility, employment, etc., etc. So what we analyze is the gap, that exists, and we calculate the cost that this is just provoking to society. So in total, just a big number is that because of all these gaps, actually, the Spanish economy, we are talking about Spain, is not growing 19 points of GDP. That is a lot. It's more than 200,000 million euros. So imagine, if we were able to close all these gaps, how the economy, in these moments of recession and crisis could be really growing in Spain. So we are doing a lot of activities, not only publishing reports, we are also, partnering with public administration, with other companies. We are creating a lot of programs to try to close those gaps with young talents, doing mentoring programs, etc., etc. So I think that is a big program that we launched 4 years ago with all these big companies, more than 1 million employees, and international companies that you recognize, like probably, BMW or Pricewaterhouse, these kind of companies. So it's a really ambitious program that, if someone is interested in knowing more, I'm also happy, to share all the results.
Hi, good afternoon. First of all, thanks for the panel. I think it was very interesting. My name is Anais Lekovic. I have a company in social innovation, but also manage a network of clusters in life science. It's a common question because I think women in health obviously is very important, and the only issue I see is that in the room we're pretty much all women. So my question comment would be for you, and maybe also for next session we can organize in the future. Maybe we can call it diversity, and then we have not this gap. So it's a little question comment for the men, especially on the panel. So thanks for being there and for taking women health very importantly. What is or what can be the motivation for other men to be more interested from the ventures, from the investors, for just to maybe see how we can reach out to more men being interested in the subject. So sorry for my common question.
No. Thank you. Actually, it's a very interesting question. So sort of a reverse kind of argument, or no, it's great. And frankly speaking, yes, you know, it's actually telling, because I was sitting here and I was watching the audience and said, you know, when the session before this, right, it was all men. And so, what does it show? And why is that? And I guess some of the aspects were already addressed, I think, in the discussion on the panel here, because, you know, from our perspective, to put it like that, you know, science is not gender related, right? In terms of whether you do good science or bad science, it's about asking the right questions. It's about, you know, deciding on the good criteria and understanding the unmet need. And I think if you're a scientist and like that area, then it doesn't really matter to me, and I suppose also not to the scientist, whether you're in, you know, working in different areas. So why would women's health be less interesting, so to say, than in oncology or in cardiovascular? And of course, it's probably because, well, that's maybe again, you know, this gap, if you like, about, okay, where are the opportunities for people to go to, for young scientists, for young talent to go to in terms of finding jobs, finding positions. And it's probably more in other areas at this point in time than in women's health research, early R&D, for example. But from, let's say, an R&D perspective, and if I look at the company Organon at this point in time, we spun from Merck, right? And the R&D organization, when we spun, was something like 500 people. And most of them, of course, came from Merck, but now we are close to 900, right? And so we're basically a melting pot of many people from many pharma companies, which is really very interesting. And if you look at the composition of that organization, fortunately, it's really a very nice mix of, you know, of both men and women. Is it already enough? No, not enough. I think there's still room for improvement. But at least in my organization, I see a good example of that. But yeah, I want to also be recognizing the fact that, you know, there's a lot of women here in the audience and no men. So why is that? You raise a very good point.
You know, one practical thing that I try to do, and yes, I do realize I'm a woman talking about investing in women's health companies, but it's just to and somebody made this point earlier, it's just to take the taboo out of mixed gendered conversations. So I will say the word vagina a lot, because that's what we're talking about. And just to take that discomfort out of the conversation, I think over time, you will have more men in the room as well. So that's a practical suggestion for anybody out there. So just say the word vagina a lot. So.
You want me to say vagina as well? Okay.
Sorry?
You want me to say the word as well?
Please, yeah, okay. Say it. Vagina.
But
I already said it, by the way, earlier.
Yeah, I didn't notice that.
But how many investors are in the room? Are there any investors in the room? Oh, good. 3?
Yeah.
Yeah, because I do think most of the investors here are male, and they're out there talking about deals. If they were interested in women's health, they might be in here. So I do, you know, let's go back to the problem. And also there are some other just interesting stats that got me slightly low when I was preparing for this. But one of them was about Nobel laureates. There are 894 male and 60 female. In chemistry, 4.1% were female. And in medicine and physiology, 5.3%. So what does this tell us? Well, you could just say, you know, it's all evolving, and maybe on a curve you'd see a big rise in numbers of women. And, you know, we had the pleasure of working with Emmanuel Charpentier's company, CRISPR, CRISPR building the team at CRISPR Therapeutics, things like that. So, I'm again optimistic in some ways, but you've got to look at those stats and think there is a long way to go still.
Agreed.
Elsy, we have another question coming in on the chat. In the title of this roundtable, you say we need to be the change. What can we do as farmer or as investor?
So Jenny already said we can say the word vagina, so that's a start. But I'd love to hear your views.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Well, thanks for that question, because it's a very important one. From our point of view, it's I'd like we need to make noise, right? And maybe you need to say the word vagina louder, but that's joking apart. It's really to emphasize the unmet need. I think that's the key point. And so it's really sort of our mission to go out there and to really make sure that that information and innovation is really required in order to address these unmet needs. And so that's how we like to play our part. But at the end of the day, it also, back to what I said earlier, basic science is required in order to address the key questions that are still out there. But I don't know what the others want to add to that.
Yeah, I think the other thing I'd add is just female leadership and female mentorship. Both, of course, me seeking mentors, but also me mentoring other people as well, because I want to be able to pull up the next generation of women's health investors, regardless if they're men or women, to do this. And look, like I think of us as a tribe, and the bigger the tribe and the more help we can give each other, the better. So I would say mentorship, both kind of up and down as well.
I think it's quite cyclical, and we've got to make having a career as a woman easier, because then they'll rise. So we need more products and services to support them. We need to smash these taboos, and we need to stop talking about it as some kind of niche, and we need to put numbers around it, really hard, in your face, return on investment numbers, because ultimately the money will come in, and so will the leadership, because all the CEO candidates we talk to about leadership roles, they want to be part of success, and success involves funding, so it's all related.
Okay, we can have one very short question.
I promise it will be very short. My name is Virginia Franco. I'm a gynecologist, CEO of a company, Yoni Solutions in Switzerland. We do vaginal microbiome analysis. As a CEO, I will make a very simple question. If you can have an opinion of what we can expect for the future perspectives of investment in women's health for us. Thank you very much.
10 seconds.
The future of women's health, I think we've already addressed some of these already, but it's just making a very, very valid business case in both kind of supply and demand. Why is your product so great and so differentiated, and why do people want to pay money for it? And by the way, who has the money to pay for it is really, really important. And if you can make that case, that's the business case I think Bianca was talking about.
Elsy,
I think we need.
No,
I think we need to close. Thank you, everyone. I think hopefully, if we do a roundtable on the same topic in a few years, maybe not next year, that's a bit ambitious, but in 2-3 years from now, we will have a much fuller room and a bit less of a gender bias. I did see some males coming in, but maybe it's for the next roundtable. So let's not get our hopes up too high, too fast. But thank you, everyone. I think there was really a great discussion.
Thank you. Indeed, our next session in 5 minutes' time, we're going to be finding out a lot more about what has happened since the second edition of Health Tech for Patients. See you in 5 minutes.